Today, my guest is Director General Stefano Sannino. He's a Director General, meaning the manager of a Directorate General, an entity that is responsible in the European Commission for a vast area of North Africa, Middle East, and the Gulf region. This is a new DG that was created only at the beginning of the year, and the heading under which it was created is the word cooperation. Welcome, Stefano.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Now, in your career, you have advised prime ministers, you have advised presidents, you have led the European External Action Service, you have been a permanent representative to Italy, you have been an ambassador to Spain, and many other things. So quite a lot of things. But now you have a mission to establish resilient and comprehensive partnerships with Mediterranean countries. Not so easy countries, from Algeria to Egypt to Israel to Jordan, Lebanon, etc., etc. So we are talking about countries and regions that are key to many of the conflicts and tensions that we witness here, but also maybe key to the future cooperation between those regions and us. Is this the biggest challenge that you've taken ever yet?
Difficult to say. I don't know. I mean, it's the... Let's put it is certainly a huge challenge because setting up a structure and a new DG and at the same time starting doing political work is a challenge in itself. I mean, because you have to share your time between management and political vision. But it is true that this is an extremely complex region, very fragmented, and as you said, also with open wars, at least till a few weeks ago. But also, and that's also a point that you have made, a region with a huge potential. And what we are trying to do, the vision that I'm trying to inject into this new DG is exactly this one, the idea of turning what is a complex, difficult, fragmented region into an opportunity for us and for them. So you are right in saying that the name of the game is very much cooperation. It's very much, for me, even more so, is integration. Is how you create what we have defined as common Mediterranean space. Now, knowing that it will take time, that not all the countries are reading on the same page, but still I think that especially under the present circumstances and in the present geopolitical landscape, this is of key importance for the whole European Union and for the Mediterranean space.
Well, we're certainly going to come back to those two aspects. We're going to come back to cooperation and integration because I think those are both very relevant in the current political scene as well. But my idea was to take you around in the tour of the regions that you are now responsible for. But we start from the furthest away, but also the one that is the current hotspot for political tensions, maybe key to much more as well, and that is Gaza. An open wound, a tragedy in the making that people are now trying to pacify and find solutions to. The United Nations Security Council this week endorsed the peace plan floated by President of the United States, Donald Trump, the 20-point peace plan. It was not exactly word to word, but the key elements of it did endorse. There are a lot of things that are open there. If we start with the one that comes closest to mind, now that we are in the beginning of your donors conference, close to the donors conference here, where does the European Union stand on this? Will the European Union be sitting on the board of peace?
Yeah. I don't know.
We are the biggest donor.
Indeed. And I mean, and maybe I would start from this because, I mean, very often the idea is that the European Union is not part of this process or has not been part of this process. It is true that the negotiations for the ceasefire in Gaza has been run by a limited number of actors. But it is also true that if you look at the bigger picture, the European Union has always been present in the area, in the theater, and it has always been a key factor for keeping the Palestinian Authority up and running. And the Palestinian Authority is a key component of the future of Palestine. If we want to get to a two-state solution, the creation of a Palestinian state, we need a Palestinian Authority who is able to run this new country. So it's and over the years we have been, as European Union, but also as European institution, as European Commission, the ones who have supported constantly and in a very sustained way the Palestinian Authority. I wouldn't say unlike others, but I mean certainly more than others, and we are by far the largest donor for the Palestinian Authority. But I don't want to take it only from the point of view of money and how much we are supporting them. It's also about the political support that we have given them. And you were making reference to the Palestinian Donors Group, which is, let's say, taking place. And this is the moment where the Palestinians and the Palestinian Authority can express and have a platform to say what they have done to reform the Palestinian Authority. If you look at the Trump plan, if you look at the resolution of the United Nations, they all say that there is a role for the Palestinian Authority in the future of Gaza, but that this role is linked also to the reform of the Palestinian Authority. And that's what we have been trying to support over time, let's say, creating space for them to work in this direction. So I think that the European Union has already a seat because we have done a number of things, and I suppose that again in the future it's not my part of business, I would say, from that point of view. But in the future, I believe that the European Union has to be sitting at the table, because in any case, we are already part of that process.
Now, but there's a long way to come to that, because if you look at the 20 points and the key elements of those 20 points, you could argue that not everything is yet in place even there. Now, but there's one area. You can put this in more complicated words and different words, but no matter which way you look at it, the words Palestinian statehood and the credible path to stand in the middle of it. Now, a few years ago, the United States, I think it was under the previous first presidency of Donald Trump, they negotiated something which is called Abraham Accords, which is an attempt to approach in a new way this whole issue. The end result would be diplomatic relations between the countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Israel and many others, including Morocco, which has already done so. But the wider aim was integration, that the situation in Palestine, Gaza, West Bank would be looked at as part of a broader economic, political integration, trade, etc., etc. Now, but Palestinian statehood, credible path to, that remains. It hasn't been solved in the peace plan. It was not really in the UNSC endorsement. Where do you see, how do we approach this issue? And do you see any way for Egypt and Saudi Arabia within which the popular opinion is really almost violently against any idea of endorsing anything without the recognition of Palestine as a state? A few things to be said. I mean, first of all, and I think that this is something that we need to put clearly in the front of the story, is that the Israeli security is a key component of the equation.
We have always said that the two-state solution is essentially two states living side by side in peace and security. And it's not a word. And we have seen, unfortunately, what happened on the 7th of October, that it's an issue that we need to take very, very seriously. So I think that the normalization of the relations between the Arab states and Israel is a key component of this process. Because, living among countries that are not recognizing you, it's not a pleasant thing to do. So I think that we need to take this aspect into consideration when we think about the Abraham's Accords. But we need also to take into consideration the point of the Palestinian statehood. And I think that this is and you're right in pointing out this issue, because this is something that's still far from being achieved. Gaza, it's in the conditions that we all know, but also the West Bank is in a very difficult situation. In this Jerusalem, there is a very difficult situation. So these aspects need to be tackled seriously in a constructive way to do that. And then when we speak about the credible path, is what I also was referring to before, the fact that progressively the Palestinian Authority has to become the actor who is delivering governance capacity in the new Palestinian states, being able to deliver services for its citizens, being able to deliver security for its citizens and outside, and also for its neighbors. So it is a process, and I understand that under the present circumstances it looks very difficult to achieve that, because you need also to have a process to rebuild trust, or at least an element of trust among the different actors. If it were not so complicated, maybe we would have managed to solve it before. So it's. But now I feel it that there is a sort of momentum which has been created by this ceasefire. I hope that also in Israel they see it in the same perspective, and I know that it sounds a little bit, let's say, counterintuitive, but what is happening in Lebanon or in Syria and possible normalizations of the relations between Israel and Lebanon and Syria is also another part of these puzzles. And all these elements have to go together, because if you do not create conditions in which, again, Israel feels comfortable about its own security and safety, then it's very difficult to imagine that all the other issues can be solved. And it's also very difficult to imagine that for how much pressure we can put from outside, Israel will move in that direction. And we have seen it essentially that as long as there has been a clear intervention by the United States, Gaza continued to be an open wound, as you said.
Yes. But what do you think about the possibility of a Palestine? Now, Palestine comprises of three components, right? It's there is a question of West Bank, there's a question of Gaza, there's a question of East Jerusalem, and then there's a corridor which is roughly 40 kilometers wide, standing between those two entities. Now, both were until 2005, 6, 7, they were governed by Fatah, and Fatah is the Palestinian Authority, and Fatah used to be called Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO. We visited 25 years ago. The then Commission President, Romano Prodi, had a brilliant idea, I think, that is very fresh in the mind today, to try and build the cooperation links between those entities. We visited Ramallah in the West Bank. I remember even me shaking hands with the diminutive Yasser Arafat at the time. And then only a few years went by and everything went away. There hasn't been free elections in West Bank for almost 20 years now, neither presidential nor state elections or general elections. And Hamas is rebuilding. Hamas is rebuilding from the ashes, from the bloodbath. How do you bring about a general election in there now that would allow a kind of unity of governance under the Palestinian Authority? I know there's no definitive answer to that. But
No, I mean, there is no magic solution. Let's be clear. That's why I'm insisting on the point that you need to create the conditions for things to happen, because it's not by having an election that you solve problems. Sometimes election can create problems. In a sense, if they let's say the result that they is not the ones that you would expect. So it's I think that we need to work collectively, and I think that this really needs to be an effort of the international community in order to make this happen. The work of the global coalition, which has been led essentially in this period by France and Saudi Arabia, is trying to create this global framework for this to happen, where you need to move a number of things at the same time, because otherwise it will be difficult again, and you do not have a silver bullet which is solving all the problems in a moment. So the process is how to recreate, let's say, the conditions for once again the Palestinian Authority to play its full role into this process, which implies also an enhanced reform effort on the Palestinian side, how to revive also the Palestinian economy, which has been essentially in a very hard situation in these last few years, how to continue with the process of normalization of between Israel and the Arab countries, and how also physically to create some sort of continuity of the Palestinian states.
Yeah.
That's why this is our preoccupation, has always been very strong about the new settlements that were, let's say, making this continuity impossible. And you were going back to the period of Romano Prodi as president of the Commission, and Chris Patten was the Commission for External Relations, and that he was always very struck by how the wall was dividing essentially the Palestinian territory. But there must be at a certain point a political determination to move in that direction.
yes, I have to admit that even in personal memory, that trip from Jerusalem to Ramallah through the barbed wire and countless number of stops, it was something to behold. But still coming back to the same issue, after so much time of tension, bloodbath, warfare, it's difficult to imagine anything really novel. But give credit to where credit is due. The current president of the United States, people see how he acts, but he is trying something new in his foreign policy. Like it or not, but they're putting kind of prosperity building first, so that the way to pacify the region may not be the convenient and conventional diplomatic route. Let hotels, casinos, wealth building, Saudi money, American money, commercial enterprises do it for you, just that everybody else should guarantee the peace. How do you see that?
Well, I think that we need to, I agree with you that, I mean, even if unconventionally, the intervention of the United States has been key in stopping the fighting and in assuring the ceasefire. I think that it was also key, the 20-point peace plan, which was, let's say, reassuring the Israelis, the Palestinians, the international communities about the principles around which this peace would have been built. And I mean, certainly the economic dimension has to play a role in this process, but it has to be done also in a way which is, let's say, respectful of the rights of the Palestinians who are living in Gaza. I mean, so it's not a question of just starting from scratch as if you were in a sort of.
But are people in kind of vacuum worried about their rights if they are given jobs and accommodation?
And that's what we are insisting very much upon. That the reconstruction has to be done by essentially Palestinian companies with Palestinian people. I mean, this is not an issue of trying to, let's say, have a sort of new state, real estate process to be established. I mean, it's if the Gaza will turn into something much better than it is now, this is fantastic. But you cannot create, let's say, a reality, an artificial reality in a context which is so complex and difficult. So, I mean, I think that it's a working process. I think that somehow the idea of betting on the capacity of Gaza to become an attractive place is good for everybody. But I repeat, it is important that this is done taking into account the rights and the interest of the Palestinian people.
But money, Palestinian companies, Palestinian enterprises, financed by what and whom? I mean, do you see any possibility for this kind of publicly funded huge reconstruction effort where Europe would be involved, given what we are pledging to do in Ukraine already?
I mean, this is, first of all, I think that the effort for Gaza reconstruction is not an effort that can be shouldered only by the European Union. On the contrary, I think that the effort has to be shouldered by a lot also by the Arab countries. And it's not, let's say, a chance that Egypt wants to host the reconstruction conference for Gaza. There is a needs assessment that is still being performed. The Palestinians have presented their ideas. They are working with World Bank. They are working also with us. We will try to refine the needs. But I think that you will have more attraction in the international community to finance a, let's say, Palestinian-oriented reconstruction rather than a reconstruction for an international community or for international actor.
Now, when you look at the situation, let's put aside the United States and let's put aside the European Union for the moment. But the key actor, the enabler in the region, really, there are two countries, Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And both of them, within their own population, they have quite a difficult situation to bear. I mean, that's why I was also saying that the Palestinian statehood remains a key factor in this. Saudi Arabia, I've seen what you've been saying publicly also about the cooperation needs and the future inclusiveness and technological cooperation, environmental cooperation between us and Saudi Arabia. But the key still, they also have to bring about the consent and assent of their population. So that must be quite a different balancing work. But you see there's big changes happening in Saudi Arabia already. Saudi
Arabia is a country which is changing by the day and changing dramatically. I have to say that I have come back from the last visit to Saudi Arabia, honestly, with a very strong impression about the vision for the future of the country, which is really trying to go beyond, let's say, the stereotypes that we had in mind when we speak about Saudi Arabia. You are right in saying that there is a very strong feeling in Saudi Arabia about what is happening in Gaza and for Palestine, and that's why I still insist, like in Egypt, I still insist that it's very difficult to imagine any durable and sustainable solution outside the perspective of the two-state solution. That's why we need to keep working on in that direction. But to come back to your point about Saudi Arabia, it is true that the country has really done a huge effort in terms of opening, in terms of reforms, in terms of willingness to reach out and to create links with not only with the countries of the region, but not only with the United States, but also with the European Union. They have a sense that they are becoming a relevant regional power, and as such, they want to have alliances and cooperation with a large number of partners. And again, the European Union certainly is one of those.
The reason for that reform, or let's say that speed of that reform, do you see that there is a certain momentum building by itself, or is it because they foresee the future of no oil, endless wealth coming from oil? That has in a way been there for decades, but now there's some reason that is kind of sparking this movement to happen much faster.
I mean, certainly there is an idea that the carbonized economy is not the future. Not the decarbonized, the carbonized the economy with fossil fuels is not the future. So they are betting also on a future which is not only based on hydrocarbons, on oil and gas. And I think that, again, it's very smart to do this move because you can do it from a position of strength for quite some time. We will still be dependent on fossil fuels, so this will provide a number of revenues to the country. But they also know that they need to be much more forward-looking when it comes to alternative energies, renewable energies and clean technologies, when it comes to innovation and research, when it comes to technologies and artificial intelligence, but also when it comes to the definition of their cultural identity in the region. So I think that there is a huge potential of cooperation with with Saudi Arabia, and again a very strong willingness on their side that without, let's say, abandoning the traditional alliances, but of diversifying and broadening the perspective of the spectrum of the alliances.
Now, in the world that we now seem to be leaving behind, West was West, East was East, and Middle East was Middle East. And West had, including the European Union, had a very clear view of the world in terms of what it should be. That the ideal is democracy in the sense of being exercised here among the European Union, human rights, media freedoms, rule of law, and all that. But at the same time, there's little evidence that the rest of the world is moving with us. Say China abstained from the UN Security Council resolution in terms of this peace plan, yet it's building in a huge amount its future on the renewables and decarbonized economy, a bit in the way like Saudi Arabia. Rapprochement in the future or not? But the more important question here is, are we heading into a kind of a reality, maybe we are already there, that cooperation is the key, but within that cooperation, principle of cooperation, is also acceptance of differences. They are what they are. If they are not adherent to democracy, it's not going to be the reason why we are not cooperating with them, because there are further bigger needs.
I think that we need to accept the fact that the model that we have built, the principle and the values on which this is built, is a model, not necessarily the model. And there are other models that are being promoted at the same time. I think that we have to be proud of our model. I think that we live in societies which are stable, open, where the individual rights are fully respected. And I think that this is something that we value enormously. And I think that it's also important that somehow we project them and we try to be a model also for others that in other countries have the same kind of aspiration and vision. But again, we need to take into account the fact that there are other models that other countries may feel attractive, and sometimes even more attractive than the one that we have. And that's why I believe that we need to be able to, in developing relations and cooperation with third countries, we need to be able to put on the table offers that are interesting and attractive for these countries, and maybe lecture a little bit less about how things should be done, and convince rather other countries to work in a certain way with us. And especially in a new geopolitical context in which multi-alignment has become very fashionable. I mean, you say before, East is East and West is West. I mean, and if you are in the middle, you have to choose which of the two. Now, I mean, you can choose something from one side, something from another side, the third thing from something else. And then we need to be able to play in this new complex environment, again, with the pride of what we have and what we represent, but also accepting that somehow we are no longer the only game in town.
Yeah. But isn't this where history makes a full circle also? Because many of these problems, starting from the borders of certain states, are Europe's doing of European states, starting from Pico Sykes and the maps that these two gentlemen used to draw up the certain states, the creation of the Saudi family and the power that it holds today, etc., etc., the Palestinian Balfour Declaration, the problem created from there. So Europe carries a huge responsibility here as well. So we are not only out of moral or ethics, but there are certain needs that we need to address now. And one of those crazy needs, and one of these biggest needs and most difficult needs at the moment, is and arises from the unstemmed, uncontrolled illegal migration. If we move away from the Middle East, which maybe and still is the heart of many problems, you go to Syria, you go to places from where millions of people have been displaced, move abroad. We come to Sahara. Here, the question of European unity today, as opposed to what it may have been in the past, is still a very much its question. Why don't we have a solution to places like Sahel or Western Sahara? Because of the lack of European unity.
I think it's a little bit more complex than that.
Of course.
It is true.
But we only have 40 minutes.
It is true that when we are united, when the European Union is united, let's say we are able to influence much more certain processes. But it is true that we have to accept that the European Union is a sort of hybrid construction where the element of let's say progressive integration, however you want to call it, or federalism, I don't know. I mean, it's has to cohabit with the fact that you have 27 governments, 27 different policies that needs to be put together. I mean, I always say is that the President of the United States can sign a presidential order and sanctions are imposed. He doesn't need to justify, he doesn't need to have a legal basis, he doesn't need to agree among all the states of the United States. While we need to do that, and it's a process. So we need to make a distinction between what can be done by countries that have by the way, a very centralized political authority, and another one where essentially the political process is much more complex, like the one that we have in the European Union. That said, I mean, if we are united, we are able to have a much greater impact on policies, on events, because we have a power. I mean, there is no doubt that we carry weight. We carry an economic weight. We carry also political weight. So we are able to influence certain processes. But it is also true that this is our way of doing business, which maybe is not the same in other countries.
But do you ever allow a certain feeling of, say, frustration to creep in? How should I say, 25 years ago, you were part of the group of people that defined a principle called the Ring of Friends under the then president of the Romano Prodi of the Commission. And the idea was to build a kind of rather extensive network of relations, agreements, treaties with countries neighboring the European Union of the time. And the key to that was also the northern Mediterranean shore countries of Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. Mm-hmm. And I remember when we visited those places, for me it was the first time to visit those three countries. From Rabat to Algiers to Tunis, and I was struck by the huge differences between cultures, between people, between governance, between politics and approaches to the region. And they are still there, aren't they? Yeah. You've advanced quite far in your relationship with Tunisia. Algeria, it doesn't really looks with suspicion to everything close to or connected to France, including the European Union. And Morocco, neither here or there.
I mean, first of all, if you are working for the European Union and in the European Union, you cannot allow yourself to be frustrated by the complexity of the process, because otherwise you have to change job and do something else. So you need to build consensus. That's the name of the game. And there is no other way to do that. You have to build consensus around your ideas, about your views of things. And I mean, to be honest, it's also the most fascinating part of this work, even if sometimes it can be complex and difficult. Second consideration, we speak of the Mediterranean as a sort of homogeneous entity.
As it was during the Roman Empire.
It's which is not, but not even in the Roman Empire, because progressively, yes. You need to accept the diversity. And if you go back to, all the literature around the Mediterranean, from Brodel to Matveyevich, you always find that they speak about many Mediterraneans, plural. Not only one, because it is true that we have one, let's say, one sea, one cultural kernel, but then at the end of the day, the differentiation are there. And that's why I think that in a way, even the idea of the time that you are referring to, the Ring of Friends, was not an idea that was, let's say, a one-size-fits-all. It was, and it wanted to take into account the differentiation and the differences that there are among the countries, and the fact that, some may have an aspiration to get closer to the European Union, others may have maybe other aspiration or other interest, and we need to work with that. And I think that it's what we are trying to do now, if I may do a little bit of marketing for the products that we have done. This is a little bit the sense of the Pact for the Mediterranean that the Commission has just approved. We are not creating a one-size-fits-all mechanism. We are providing a number of different initiatives and actions around which we want to gather as much support as possible. But I'm not going to seek the unanimity. And even yesterday during a conference, someone was saying, you have to sit everybody around the same table and oblige them to get integrated. I said, how can I oblige people to do things that they don't want to do? So I can convince, I can try to create, let's say, the conditions for, and hopefully if we can really get the pact up and running and a number of these actions being implemented, maybe people will be convinced to convene around projects, around ideas, with the final objective, once again, of getting better integration of this region. But we need to accept the fact that, again, the region is very diversified, fragmented, that there are problems. We have spoken about the Middle East and what is happening between Gaza and Israel, but also the problems that we have in Lebanon, which is still there, or the complexity of the relationship between Algeria and Morocco that still needs to be, let's say, fully solved. Or the difficult situation in which Libya is in this moment. So, all this is part of the same story. And
but that is a good point. That since you mentioned Libya, the Pact for Mediterranean, it's a good idea. Everybody supports it insofar as it is today. But there's like a sore wound in the middle of it, everything, and that is Libya. Can anything ever really work before solution to who governs what Libya is?
I think that
It's a smuggler's paradise at the moment.
I mean, it's very complex. It is true. It's a very complex. I mean, the country and the division between East and West is it's something on which again we will need to keep on working in order to unify the country. For the moment, there is a sort of let's say equilibrium that has been found and which is helping at least to allow us to focus on some projects or some, let's say, lines of action for the society at large that can benefit, let's say, the younger generations, the proper economy, clean, more transparent. So, I mean, I think that there are things that can be done, but it is true that as long as there is no clear solution about the future of the country, I mean, there are limits to what can be done.
But where does the solution come from? Because history is not very kind to us. The only time there was stability in the post-Second World War period in the country was the time when it was run by a guy who murdered his own people, Muammar Gaddafi. Now, when he's gone, for all the good reasons, no doubt, ever since that day, there hasn't been any kind of stability. Yeah. What is the stability in the future? Is it another strong man or a woman, or is it a kind dream of democracy?
I mean, you build democracy. Democracy is not happening overnight. I mean, it's you build democracy, you build the conditions for democracy to develop, for what we were speaking before about rule of law, good governance, and so on. I mean, we are all committed now to support a process which is being run by the United Nations to bring the country together, to go to an electoral process that could, let's say, install a government which is able to have control on the whole territory. But I mean, I admit that we are still very far from this to happen. But there is the policy that we are following is a policy of stabilization and of the country based on its unity, and that's where we are all. That's what we are all working.
Well, I would like to close with an anecdote and the question. In the anecdote, we were visiting Marrakesh, and in the central market square of Marrakesh, by its side, there was a restaurant, and the restaurant had a beautiful terrace. The sun was setting, and there was a group of us traveling with the president. There was Italians, there was a Frenchman, there were Belgians, and there was this poor Finn, and must have been other nationalities too. We are not that many. But I think that at least my own recollection, the very moment that I felt it very European, was when the sun was setting and I was looking at the market square. I was thinking, that is not Europe. Here is Europe. Do you ever feel that kind of a thing when you travel there, that the kind of the European identity, you sense it's the strongest when you go further away from Europe?
In a way, yes. It's a little bit like what happens with communities that live outside their country. They tend to be attached to their country even more than the people living in their own country. The diaspora is always this sort of, let's say, sense of nostalgic feeling about the country that it belongs to. So it is true that when you are in an external environment, you feel more, how to say, you tend to compare yourself and the closeness or the distance. I would say two things. First of all, that the group that you're mentioning was a very homogeneous group in terms of friendship, sense of perspective, and sense of purpose. And this is something that is creating bonds that go again beyond the the national borders. I mean, since we are here recalling, I think, remember that one of the first meetings in which I took part in when I joined the European Commission, I saw this sense of solidarity among colleagues. It was fantastic, and I felt a little bit like still excluded from that because I was not yet part of that story. So that's one part of the story, the sense of the internal solidarity, and I think that especially those who are working in the European institutions develop this very much, because I mean you're working side by side, and you overcome barriers and you overcome, let's say, administrative differences and cultures. The other thing is that it's a little bit also the perspective, because maybe as a Finn you would find a little bit more difficult to feel comfortable in that situation. Maybe someone coming from the south of Italy would find it easier to understand the logic and the codes and what was happening there. But it's I think that this is also the effort that is, I mean, this is the beauty of the work that we are doing, if you like, this kind of work, that you are trying to build bridges and to let's say to try to understand which is the other side, the culture, the elements that maybe you don't know, maybe you don't understand. Maybe at the beginning they can create a certain distance, and how to create a link which is creating something new together. And that's the point, I think, of the effort that we need to do, and that's why I'm attached to the idea of the co-creation for the Pact for the Mediterranean, the co-ownership, because if we do not stay together, if we are not sitting around the same table, if we are not making choices together, these distances in difficult moments can create problems. And on the contrary, if you can manage to get, let's say, to reduce this gap and this space, then even in difficult moments, then you can be able to reach out and to solve maybe a difficult problem or a difficult situation.
Now, I'm getting impatient signal language from outside. So So in your heart of hearts, this is not just a job. This is not just professional diplomacy for you. It's also something that you feel deeply about.
Well, this has always been the case. I've had the chance of doing what I really wanted to do as a profession in life. And it is true that when you feel strongly, you have a certain sense of, and I say it without any, but a sense of the mission of the work that you do. So you really believe that your work, your commitment, your engagement can produce a change, can make a difference, and that's what is extremely motivating for us to wake up and to work as many hours as we can every day.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ray. It was good to see you again.